May 22nd, 1944. The English countryside near Dover hums with an industrious energy that seems to signal an imminent, crushing blow. Hundreds of tanks are lined up in neat rows, their cannon barrels pointing towards the French coast. Soldiers in their thousands drill in formation. Supply trucks rumble through the narrow lanes. Yet, a lone German reconnaissance plane, flying high above the cloud cover, captures photographs that reveal a bizarre truth. A sudden gust of wind topples one of the 30-ton Sherman tanks, which wobbles and collapses into a crumpled, rubbery heap. Another tank, being moved by two soldiers, floats gently a few feet off the ground. This was not the 1st United States Army Group. This was a masterpiece of strategic deception, a phantom army of artists, sound engineers, and radio operators whose weapons were not shells and bullets, but illusion and sound. Their mission: to convince the most formidable war machine in history that the inevitable invasion would come anywhere but the beaches of Normandy. The concept of military deception is as old as war itself. But the scale and sophistication envisioned by Allied planners in 1943 were unprecedented. The impending invasion of Northwest Europe, Operation Overlord, presented a terrifyingly simple strategic problem. The Germans held every defensive advantage. They controlled the coastline, had fortified its ports, and could move reinforcements along interior lines. A direct, head-on assault against a fully prepared Wehrmacht was a recipe for a bloodbath and potential failure. The only viable solution was to ensure the German army was looking the wrong way when the real blow landed. This was the genesis of the London Controlling Section, a secretive body tasked with weaving a web of lies on a grand strategic scale. Their mandate was to create a bodyguard of lies, a phrase famously coined by Winston Churchill, to protect the ultimate secret of the war: the when and where of D-Day. The operational plan, codenamed Bodyguard, was a sprawling tapestry of interconnected deceptions targeting German intelligence across Europe. Its most critical and audacious component was Operation Fortitude, which itself was split into two main acts: Fortitude North, threatening an invasion of Norway, and Fortitude South, creating the illusion of a massive army group poised to strike at the Pas de Calais, the narrowest point of the English Channel, and the most logical landing site. The logic was impeccable. The German High Command, the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, OKW, already believed the Pas de Calais was the most likely target. The Allies' task was not to convince them of something new, but to confirm their deepest-held convictions. They would feed the enemy's existing biases, making the real plan in Normandy seem like an obvious diversion. The sheer audacity of Fortitude South required a physical manifestation. A real army group of over 1 million men would leave an undeniable footprint: camps, vehicle parks, supply depots, headquarters buzzing with radio traffic. To mimic this, the Allies needed to invent an entire army from whole cloth. Thus, the 1st United States Army Group, FUSAG, was born, a paper formation with a larger-than-life commander, the formidable General George S. Patton. Patton was the perfect figurehead. The Germans respected him as the Allies' most aggressive tank commander and believed he would lead the main assault. His very public presence in England, while being kept away from the actual invasion force, lent crucial credibility to the ruse. But a famous general and a paper headquarters were not enough. The deception needed flesh and blood, sound and movement. It needed to be visible to the prying eyes of the Luftwaffe and audible to the listening ears of German signals intelligence. This need gave birth to one of the war's most peculiar units, the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, later known as the Ghost Army. The directive handed to this unique unit was as clear as it was surreal. Simulate a force of 30,000 men using any means necessary. They were to be magicians of the battlefield. Their stage, the fields of Kent. Their audience, the German High Command. Their success would be measured not in territory taken, but in German divisions held in reserve, away from the bloody sands of Omaha, Utah, Gold, Juno, and Sword. The pressure was immense. If the illusion was pierced, if a single German analyst spotted a flaw in the mirage, the entire Overlord operation could collapse into a catastrophic failure. The architects of the deception had laid the blueprint. Now, they needed to find the artists who could bring their phantom army to life. The strategic blueprint for the grand deception was in place. But a plan, no matter how brilliant, is useless without the right people to execute it. The Allied High Command now faced a unique personnel problem. They needed to recruit not more soldiers, but artists, illustrators, radio wizards, and sound engineers, a cadre of illusionists who could weaponize creativity. The creation of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops was an experiment in military recruitment unlike any other. Its ranks were not filled with traditional infantrymen, but with men plucked from art schools, advertising agencies, radio stations, and theater stages. The unit's roster read like a who's who of the American creative scene. Fashion designer Bill Blass, who would later use his skills to design realistic military patches and uniforms for the Phantom units. Painter Ellsworth Kelly, and art director Arthur Singer, among dozens of others. These were not men who naturally fit the military mold. They were individualists, thinkers, and creators suddenly thrust into the rigid structure of the United States Army. Their basic training was a period of profound culture shock, where they learned to fire rifles and march in formation, all while their commanding officers tried to figure out how to harness their unique talents for the war effort. The unit was organized into 4 highly specialized companies, each a crucial component of the deception machine. The 603rd Engineer Camouflage Battalion was the heart of the visual deception. These were the artists, the men who would create the physical illusion of the army, using inflatable tanks, trucks, artillery pieces, and even airplanes. Their canvas was the landscape, and their tools were air compressors and paintbrushes. Then came the 3,132nd Signal Service Company, the Sonic Deception Unit. This was perhaps the most technologically advanced and secretive element of the Ghost Army. Their weapon was sound. They carried truck-mounted phonographs and giant speakers capable of projecting pre-recorded audio tracks of armored divisions, moving, bridge-building operations, and mixed unit activity from miles away. They were the architects of the Army's audible soul. The Signal Company, Special, was responsible for radio deception, or spoof radio. This was the most cerebral and high-stakes game of all. These operators had to mimic the distinct, often sloppy, Morse code fists of real radio operators in fictional units. They created the entire radio network of the fictitious FUSAG, transmitting fake messages about troop movements, supply shortages, and morale, all according to a meticulously crafted script designed to be intercepted by German listening posts. Finally, a combat convoy unit provided the physical presence. Using a handful of real vehicles, they would drive in looping circuits through local towns, deliberately changing unit markings to create the impression of massive traffic flow. They were the actors on the stage, making the local French and potential spies believe they were seeing the vanguard of a vast force. Training this unconventional unit was a process of trial and error conducted in extreme secrecy at Camp Forest, Tennessee. They practiced setting up entire fake tank battalions in the dead of night, learning how to position inflatables to create realistic shadows and how to mix paint to simulate dust and grime on their rubber vehicles. The sonic unit rehearsed their audio plays, perfecting the volume and directionality of their broadcasts. The greatest challenge was operational security. The men of the 23rd were told that the success of the entire invasion of Europe could hinge on their silence. They could not tell their families what they were doing, nor could they discuss their work with other soldiers. They existed in a bubble of secrecy, a ghost unit training for a ghost war, their ultimate test awaiting them in the fields of England, where the eyes and ears of the enemy were always watching, always listening. While the illusionists trained, the Allied war machine was producing their fantastical arsenal. The cornerstone of their visual deception was the inflatable tank, a masterpiece of deceptive engineering. Manufactured by American rubber companies, these were not simple balloons. They were detailed, full-scale replicas of Sherman tanks, howitzer cannons, and cargo trucks, crafted from rubberized silk. When inflated, they were remarkably convincing, from a few hundred yards away, the standard observation range for a German reconnaissance plane. The artists of the 603rd would then use their skills to add weathering, mud spatters, and realistic tread marks in the ground to complete the illusion. A fake tank battalion, which in reality required only a few dozen men and a couple of air compressors, could be deployed in a fraction of the time and with a tiny fraction of the resources of a real one. But an army is more than just its vehicles. It leaves a trace on the entire environment. The Ghost Army had to simulate this logistical footprint with meticulous attention to detail. They constructed fake oil depots from canvas and old barrels. They built landing crafts, known as big bobs, from scaffolding and canvas, mooring them in estuaries along the English coast opposite Calais. From the air, these assemblages looked like an invasion fleet preparing to embark. They erected sprawling camps of empty tents. They even created fake command posts, complete with laundry lines and mock headquarters, staffed by a handful of men who would wear the shoulder patches of the fictitious divisions, ensuring that any German spy on the ground would see the correct insignia. The level of theatricality extended to the men themselves. The soldiers of the 23rd became masters of impersonation. They would sew on the shoulder patches of different real and fictional units, visiting pubs and towns in Kent to spread disinformation passively. A soldier might casually complain in a bar about being in the ghost unit, only to be quickly corrected by his companion, who would loudly state their actual, fictional unit number, a piece of play-acted information meant for any listening ears. They became actors in a sprawling, immersive play where the stakes were the lives of thousands of their comrades. The final, crucial element was integrating this physical deception with the other elements of fortitude. The fake tank parks and supply dumps were not placed randomly. Their locations were carefully chosen to correlate with the fake radio transmissions being sent by the signal company, Special. If the radio traffic indicated the 5th Armored Division was moving to a new staging area, the visual deception unit would be there the next day, inflating a rubber division for the Luftwaffe's cameras to find. This synergy was the true genius of the operation. The Ghost Army did not rely on a single method. It created a multi-sensory, self-reinforcing reality. The visual evidence confirmed the radio intelligence, which was itself supported by the human intelligence gleaned from double agents. The Germans were not just being told a lie. They were being immersed in a completely fabricated reality, a phantom world built from rubber, radio waves, and sheer audacity, all pointing one way, toward the Pas de Calais. The Phantom Army was a masterpiece of visual and auditory theater, but for the deception to truly penetrate the German high command, it needed a human heartbeat. It required believable intelligence from seemingly reliable agents on the ground. Agents who were, in reality, entirely under Allied control. The linchpin of the entire bodyguard deception was not a weapon or a piece of technology, but a secretive British intelligence committee, known as the 20 Committee. Its name derived from the Roman numerals XX, a double cross. By 1944, this group had achieved one of the most remarkable intelligence coups in history. They had identified every single German agent operating in Britain and had successfully turned them into double agents. This network, codenamed the Double Cross System, became the primary channel through which the lies of fortitude were fed directly to the enemy. The most valuable of these double agents was a complex and unlikely figure, known by his British codename, Garbo. A Spanish citizen named Juan Pujol Garcia, Garbo was a man of profound imagination and a deep antipathy for Nazism. He had initially offered his services to the British and been rejected. Undeterred, he created a fictional network of 27 sub-agents from whole cloth and began feeding fabricated intelligence to the Germans from Lisbon, so convincing them of his dedication that they paid him a salary and provided him with secret inks and codes. When British intelligence finally realized what they had, they swiftly recruited him and brought him to England. From there, Garbo and his case officer, Thomas Harris, wove an elaborate tapestry of lies, building credibility with the Abwehr, German military intelligence, by mixing truthful but harmless information with strategically vital falsehoods. Garbo's role in Fortitude was nothing short of spectacular. In the months leading up to D-Day, his transmissions became a carefully orchestrated symphony of deception. He reported on the movements of the fictional FU-SAG, confirming the order of battle that Allied radio deception was broadcasting. He provided detailed false reports on troop concentrations in southeast England. His agents supposedly saw embarkation exercises and overheard soldiers' gossip in pubs, all pointing toward a massive buildup aimed at the Pas de Calais. The sheer volume and internal consistency of his reports made them irresistible to German intelligence analysts. Garbo was so trusted that he was awarded the Iron Cross by a grateful Germany for his services, an award he accepted with what must have been immense pride. But Garbo's masterstroke came in the early hours of June 6, 1944. As the real invasion began on the beaches of Normandy, Garbo sent a frantic, encrypted message to his German handlers. He berated them for not waking their senior officers to take his call, claiming he had crucial information about the ongoing landings. He stated that the Normandy attack was a diversion, a feint to draw German reserves away from the real main target, the Pas de Calais. This message, arriving just hours after the landings began, was a psychological masterstroke. It played directly into the existing biases of the German High Command and gave them a reason to rationalize the Normandy attack as part of a larger, predicted Allied plan. By the time the message was decoded and reached Hitler, it had helped cement the Führer's conviction to hold the powerful 15th Army at Calais. Waiting for an invasion that would never come, the double cross was complete. While Fortitude South was the main effort, the Allies ran a simultaneous, supporting deception to tie down German forces across Europe. Fortitude North. This operation aimed to convince Adolf Hitler that the Allies were preparing a major amphibious assault on Norway, supported by a Soviet offensive from the north. Hitler had a well-known strategic obsession with Norway, fearing its loss would cut off vital iron ore supplies and provide the Allies with bases for bombing Germany. The Allies sought to exploit this paranoia. The deception for Fortitude North relied heavily on the same multi-layered approach as its southern counterpart, but with different tools. A fictional British Fourth Army was created, with its headquarters in Edinburgh. Since physical deception with inflatables was less feasible across the vast and remote Scottish Highlands, the effort leaned more heavily on radio spoofing and the double-cross agents. Fake radio traffic simulated the Fourth Army's preparations for Arctic warfare. The signals mimicked the communications between units, training for mountain operations, and amphibious landings. The airwaves crackled with fake requests for cold weather equipment, ski training manuals, and discussions about coordinating with a non-existent Soviet force. The double-cross agents were again instrumental. Several turned agents, including the legendary Garbo, sent reports to their German handlers about troop sightings in Scotland. They spoke of specialized mountain divisions and sightings of landing craft in Scottish ports. One agent reported on a fictitious meeting between Allied and Soviet military officials to coordinate the upcoming campaign. This fabricated intelligence was carefully designed to feed Hitler's preconceived notions and to suggest a grand strategic pincer movement against Scandinavia. The success of Fortitude North was measured in the German reaction. The Germans maintained a garrison of nearly 12 divisions in Norway throughout the war, a significant force that could have been deployed to the Eastern Front or to reinforce the defenses in France. German naval and air assets were also diverted to patrol the Norwegian Sea. Reconnaissance flights over Scottish ports increased, and the German High Command continually assessed the threat as genuine. While not as decisive as the Calais ruse, Fortitude North successfully played upon the Führer's strategic anxieties, immobilizing hundreds of thousands of German troops in a secondary theater and contributing to the overall dilution of German strength in Northwest Europe. It was a classic example of how a well-crafted illusion, targeted at a specific psychological vulnerability, could yield strategic dividends far beyond the resources committed to it. The stage was now set for the main event, the grand performance in the South, where the Ghost Army would take center stage to deliver the most consequential deception of the war. While Fortitude North successfully pinned German divisions in Norway, the main event was unfolding in the southeast of England. Here, the Ghost Army began its final, meticulous preparations for the performance of a lifetime, a theatrical production where the curtain would rise on the eve of D-Day, with the fate of the free world hanging in the balance. The Pas de Calais represented the most logical and therefore most dangerous invasion point for the Allied forces. Its proximity to the English coast meant shorter transit for landing craft and greater air cover from fields in Kent and Sussex. For the German High Command, it was an article of faith that this was where the main blow would fall. Operation Fortitude South was not designed to introduce a new idea, but to fan the flames of this existing conviction into an unshakable certainty. The entire deception was a monumental exercise in confirmation bias, giving the enemy exactly the evidence they expected to see. The centerpiece of this grand illusion was the 1st United States Army Group, or FUSAG. This entirely fictional formation was presented as a massive, million-strong force, comprising both real and invented units, all under the command of the flamboyant and widely feared General George S. Patton. Patton was the perfect avatar for the ruse. The Germans considered him the Allies' most brilliant and aggressive armored commander, the man most likely to lead a decisive thrust. His very public, and seemingly sidelined, presence in England throughout the spring of 1944 was a critical piece of psychological warfare. While Eisenhower and Montgomery prepared the real invasion force in the West, Patton made speeches, and was conspicuously seen near the Fusag headquarters, a magnet for German attention. The Ghost Army gave this paper formation a physical body. Across Kent, the artists of the 603rd Engineer Battalion erected entire divisions of inflatable tanks and artillery. From the air, the landscape transformed into a bustling military encampment. Rubber Sherman tanks were arranged in realistic lagers, canvas trucks crowded fake motor pools, and inflatable aircraft sat on auxiliary airfields. The combat convoy unit ensured that the few real vehicles they had were constantly on the move, churning up dust on country roads and displaying the insignia of Fusag's fictional corps. The sonic unit broadcast the sounds of armored columns and construction activity under the cover of darkness, creating an audible landscape of preparation that could be picked up by German listening posts across the channel. The deception was woven into the very fabric of daily life. Soldiers from the Ghost Army, wearing the shoulder patches of the 85th and 96th Infantry Divisions, units that did not exist, would frequent pubs and markets in the tin. They would engage in carefully staged conversations, complaining about the wait or speculating about the big show across the Strait of Dover. This human-level theater, combined with the visual and auditory spectacle, created an impregnable narrative. Every source of intelligence available to the Germans' aerial reconnaissance, signals, interception, and human intelligence all converged on the same inescapable conclusion. A vast American army, led by their best general, was massing in Kent, and its target was the port of Calais. The Calais Gambit was a masterclass in strategic storytelling, and its climax would coincide with the moment the real army landed over 200 miles to the west. If the visual and sonic deceptions were the body of the Phantom Army, the radio spoofing was its central nervous system. The spoof radio operators of the signal company, Special, were the masterminds behind this invisible, high-stakes ballet. Their battlefield was the electromagnetic spectrum, and their weapons were Morse code keys and carefully crafted scripts. They were tasked with bringing the fictional Fusag to life through the airwaves, simulating the chaotic, dense, and often mundane radio traffic of a massive military force preparing for a monumental undertaking. The work demanded an extraordinary level of skill and discipline. Each radio operator had to meticulously study and then mimic the unique fist of a real operator from a specific unit. A fist, the distinctive rhythm, spacing, and pressure of someone sending Morse code, was as unique as a fingerprint. German signals intelligence analysts were known to track individual operators as they moved between units, using them as a way to verify the authenticity of a formation. The Ghost Army operators had to create a cast of believable characters and maintain their personas for months. A single, clumsy transmission, a moment of perfect textbook code, where a real soldier might be tired or sloppy, could unravel the entire intricate web. The content of the messages was just as carefully manufactured. The radio traffic followed a master script that outlined the daily life of Fusag. There were logistical requests for fuel and spare parts, reports on training exercises, administrative messages about promotions and discipline, and personal messages sent in low-level codes that the Germans were known to be able to break. The traffic volume was calibrated to match what a genuine army group would produce. They created fake rivalries between units, simulated communications breakdowns, and even staged mock arguments between signal officers, all to inject a layer of authentic chaos into the performance. This radio drama was perfectly synchronized with the other elements of the deception. When a double-cross agent like Garbo was scheduled to report seeing elements of a specific division moving to a new location. The spoof radio team would already have been simulating that unit's radio net from its old position for weeks. The transition to the new location would be mirrored in their transmissions, creating a seamless and verifiable narrative for the German analysts piecing the puzzle together. The radio waves did not just carry messages. They carried a reality, a meticulously constructed parallel universe where a vast army lived, trained, and planned. Its every radio whisper carefully designed to lead the German High Command to one fateful and fatal conclusion. The air over Kent was thick with lies, and each one was a lifeline for the thousands of young men sailing towards the very real bullets and steel of the Normandy. The web of deception was now fully spun, a perfect blend of visual, sonic, and radio illusion, all authenticated by double agents. But the ultimate test of this phantom army was not in its creation, but in the enemy's reaction. Would the German High Command, with its own sophisticated intelligence apparatus, truly believe in the ghosts they had conjured? Beyond the silent rubber tanks and the invisible radio waves, the Ghost Army wielded another, more visceral weapon: sound. The mission of the 3132nd Signal Service Company was to create an audible atmosphere of war, to convince German listeners that massive military formations were on the move under the cover of darkness. Their tools were state-of-the-art wire recorders and massive amplifier systems mounted on half-track vehicles, an arsenal collectively known as the sonic cars. The process was one of painstaking sonic verisimilitude. Before deploying to England, the unit had been sent to record actual armored and infantry divisions during training exercises in the United States. They captured the distinct, grinding roar of tank engines, starting in unison, the clatter of treads on different types of terrain, the shouted commands of officers, and the ambient noise of a battalion setting up or breaking camp. These recordings were then edited into hour-long soundscapes that could be broadcast to simulate specific military activities. One recording might depict an armored column moving down a road, complete with the changing engine sounds and the squeak of suspension. Another would simulate the sounds of a bridge being built at night, with the splash of pontoons and the clang of engineers at work. Deploying these sonic deceptions was a tactical operation in itself. The unit would move under cover of darkness to a position close to the front, often near the coast where sound would carry across the water to German listening posts in France. Setting up the speakers was a delicate and dangerous task, requiring perfect silence from the crew. Once in position, they would begin their broadcast, the powerful speakers projecting the sounds of a phantom division from an empty field. The psychological impact was profound. For the German intelligence analysts listening miles away, the evidence was irrefutable. The sound of dozens of tanks moving at night was impossible to fake, or so they believed. They would log the activity, report the movement of what they assumed was a real unit, and thus further cement the reality of the Allied order of battle they had been led to believe. The men of the sonic unit lived in a world of strange contradictions. They were sound engineers in uniform, their work a bizarre blend of technical precision and theatrical performance. During a broadcast, they had to remain in absolute silence, their own real-world sounds hidden by the cacophony they were projecting. They could hear the distant crump of actual artillery or the drone of a reconnaissance plane, a reminder that their abstract, artistic mission had deadly serious consequences. The success of their war noise was total. Not once did the Germans suspect that the armored divisions they heard moving at night were nothing but carefully curated recordings, a symphony of deception played on the largest speakers ever used in warfare. The true measure of the Ghost Army's success is found not in Allied reports, but in the classified dispatches and strategic assessments of the German High Command. Through decoded ultra-intercepts, the Allies were able to peer directly into the enemy's mind, and what they saw was the most satisfying validation possible. The Germans had bought the illusion completely. The German intelligence apparatus, particularly the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht's own analysis division, produced a series of detailed situation maps and weekly summaries in the spring of 1944. These documents, intended for Hitler and his top generals, consistently identified the 1st United States Army Group as the primary threat. The maps showed FUSAG as a massive force, comprising between 30 and 50 divisions, positioned squarely in southeast England. The Pas de Calais was repeatedly highlighted as the most probable invasion site, with Normandy often assessed as a possible secondary or diversionary target. The evidence they cited was a direct echo of the Ghost Army's work: aerial photography of tank concentrations, intercepted radio traffic from the fictional Corps, and agent reports from the Double Cross network. The most critical moment came in the days immediately following the D-Day landings. While the real battle for Normandy raged, the German High Command remained convinced that the main assault was still to come. Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt, commander-in-chief in the West, initially suspected a diversion, but was overruled by Hitler, who had been profoundly influenced by the Fortitude deception. The Führer's own intelligence briefs, heavily reliant on Garbo's messages, confirmed his belief in the Calais threat. This conviction led to the fateful decision to hold the entire 15th Army, a force of over 300,000 men and several powerful panzer divisions, in Maine-d'Hiver, reserve around Calais. For 7 crucial weeks, these forces remained idle, waiting for a ghost, while the Allies fought to consolidate their fragile foothold in Normandy. This strategic paralysis was the Ghost Army's ultimate victory. The absence of the 15th Army from the Normandy battlefield was a greater contribution than any single division's combat performance. It allowed the Allies to build up their forces on the beaches without being overwhelmed by a massive, immediate counterattack. It gave them time to solve their logistical nightmares and to slowly, bloodily, break out of the hedgerows. Every day that the German 15th Army stared across the Channel at the empty fields of Kent was a day bought with the lives of soldiers in Normandy. The enemy's eyes had been perfectly deceived. They had seen the Phantom Army, heard its radio chatter, and believed in its existence so completely that they rendered one of their most powerful formations strategically useless. The Ghost Army, without firing a single shot, had won one of the most decisive victories of the entire war. The guns in Europe fell silent, and the truth of the Great Deception was gradually revealed. But for the men of the Ghost Army, the end of the war meant the beginning of a long silence. Their incredible story, one of the best-kept secrets of the conflict, would remain largely untold for decades, its full impact and legacy slowly coming to light. With the war won, the soldiers of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops returned home not as heroes, but as ordinary veterans bound by an oath of secrecy. Their mission was classified for decades, their files locked away in military archives. They dispersed back into civilian life to their art studios, advertising firms, and radio stations forbidden from speaking of their unique contribution. This enforced silence meant that their story was largely absent from the initial histories of the war. While the exploits of infantry divisions and bomber crews became the stuff of legend, the tale of the artists and engineers who fooled the German High Command remained a footnote, known only to a small circle of intelligence officials and the men who lived it. The first cracks in this wall of silence appeared in the 1980s, when declassification efforts began to release documents related to strategic deception. It was not until the early 21st century, however, that the full scope of the Ghost Army's activities was officially recognized. Through the dedicated work of historians, children of the veterans, and the few surviving members themselves, the story was painstakingly pieced together. In 2022, after a long campaign, the United States Congress awarded the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops the Congressional Gold Medal, the nation's highest civilian honor, finally bestowing upon them the public recognition they had been denied for over 3/4 of a century. The tactical legacy of the Ghost Army is directly visible in the modern military doctrine of information operations and psychological warfare. Their multi-sensory approach, blending visual, audio, and electronic deception, became the foundational model for later units. During the Cold War, the principles they pioneered were refined to deceive Soviet intelligence about NATO capabilities and intentions. In more recent conflicts, their DNA can be seen in the use of advanced camouflage, electronic warfare to spoof enemy radar, and psychological operations designed to shape the perceptions of both enemy forces and local populations. The modern battlefield is not just a physical space, but an informational one. And the Ghost Army were among the first to prove that victory in this realm could be as decisive as victory in combat. Beyond their military impact, the story of the Ghost Army stands as a timeless testament to the power of creativity and non-violent problem-solving in the face of overwhelming force. In a war dominated by industrial-scale destruction, this small unit of artists and technicians achieved strategic victories through illusion and intellect. They demonstrated that a cleverly crafted idea could be more powerful than a panzer division, that a painted canvas could stop an army as effectively as a concrete wall. Their legacy is a powerful reminder that innovation often comes from the intersection of disparate fields, where art meets engineering and theater meets warfare. Perhaps the most profound legacy, however, is the human one. The story of the Ghost Army adds a crucial layer of nuance to our understanding of the greatest generation. It showcases not just their courage and sacrifice, but their immense creativity and adaptability. It proves that the war was won not only by the infantryman with his rifle, or the pilot in his cockpit, but also by the illustrator with his brush, the sound engineer with his recorder, and the radio operator with his Morse key. They were soldiers who fought with their imaginations, and in doing so, they saved countless lives and helped shape the course of history, finally stepping out of the shadows to claim their rightful place in history. From the drafting tables of artists to the rubber factories producing inflatable tanks, from the secret recordings of armored columns to the encrypted lies woven into the airwaves, the Ghost Army waged a war of perception. They constructed a reality so compelling, so meticulously detailed, that it held the most formidable army in Europe in a state of paralyzed indecision at the most critical moment of the 20th century. Their weapons were not designed to take life, but to save it. Their victory was measured not in territory captured, but in divisions diverted, in time bought, in blood not spilled. They stand as an enduring symbol of a profound truth, that in the theater of war, the most powerful weapon is sometimes not a sword, but a mirror, held up to reflect back the enemy's deepest fears and firmest convictions, until they are defeated by their own certainty. The story of the Ghost Army proves that history is full of hidden chapters waiting to be discovered. If you want to uncover more of these incredible, untold stories of ingenuity and courage, subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell. We rely on your support to bring these vital pieces of our past to light. Tell us in the comments which other secret units or forgotten operations you'd like us to explore next.